Drop everything you are doing. What I am about to reveal will make you question every single thing you thought you knew about professional sports management. Just yesterday, one of the most powerful voices in sports media did something I have never witnessed in 20 years of broadcasting history. Stephen A. Smith did not yell. He did not put on a show. He sat down, took off his glasses, looked straight into the camera, and delivered the most brutal 4-minute takedown in the history of ESPN. Not a player who choked under pressure, not a coach who lost the locker room, but the actual commissioner of the WNBA. And this is where the story takes a turn so sharp, you will probably need to replay this section just to make sure you heard me correctly. The WNBA, a league that bled cash for 20 years, just formally threatened the one human being who saved them from extinction, Caitlin Clark. They put it in writing. Official letterhead, heavy legal jargon, and a formal warning. Now, before you assume this was some scandal, a fight, or a midnight arrest, let me stop you right there. There was no scandal, there was no violation, there was zero conduct issue at all. Caitlin Clark's crime? She simply signed a deal to talk about basketball on national television. That is it. She agreed to join NBC, the network, airing their own games as a commentator. The league office responded like she had joined a rival franchise in a foreign country. Sit with that for a moment. The pure insanity of this choice does not even hit you all at once. It creeps up, it settles in, and suddenly you are asking yourself, wait, did they really just do that? Yes. Yes, they did. And what Stephen A. Smith revealed about the internal chaos at the league headquarters is actually worse than you think. Much worse. Because this is not just about Caitlin Clark anymore. This is about a league learning the hardest lesson in pro sports. You never bite the hand that feeds you. Especially when that hand is the only thing keeping your entire operation from collapsing into total irrelevance. But Commissioner Cathy Engelbert bit anyway. And what happens next will reshape the future of women's basketball forever, one way or another. Conflict of interest. Those were the 3 words that pushed Stephen A. Smith right over the edge. 3 words typed on official stationery, signed, sealed, and delivered to the most valuable asset women's pro basketball has ever seen. When Stephen A. read those words on first take, the entire studio went silent. You could hear a pin drop because he did not just read them. He dissected them. He held them to the light and exposed them for exactly what they are, a lie. Let us look at this logically for just a second. The league claims Caitlin Clark appearing on NBC, talking basketball, and keeping the sport relevant during the offseason is a conflict of interest. But hold on. NBC is an official partner of the WNBA. NBC just signed a multi-billion-dollar rights deal to broadcast professional basketball into millions of homes for the next 10 years. NBC is the reason that player salaries are finally projected to rise. Let me get this straight. Caitlin Clark wants to go on the network that pays the league bills to talk about the sport to an audience they desperately need to reach. And the league calls that a violation. Stephen A. Smith leaned into the mic and asked the question that every single person watching was already thinking. Are you trying to destroy your own product? Because that is what this looks like. This is not governance. This is not about rule enforcement. This looks like sabotage. Think about the precedent here. Draymond Green hosts a podcast and appears on TNT while actively playing for the Golden State Warriors. Tom Brady signed a massive deal with Fox while he could still technically play football. Did the NBA send Draymond a warning? Did the NFL threaten Brady with a conflict of interest? No. They celebrated it. They amplified it. They understood that when your stars shine brighter, the whole league glows. But the WNBA, they seem terrified of that light. They seem paralyzed by the thought that one player might become bigger than the brand itself. And that brings us to the part of Stephen A.'s rant that mainstream clips cut out, the part that makes your stomach turn. He pointed out that for years, players were forced to go overseas during the off-season. They go to Turkey, they go to Russia, They go to China. They risk injury in foreign leagues just to make a living wage because the league could not pay them enough. The league never seemed to have a problem with that. They never called that a conflict of interest. But the moment Caitlin Clark finds a way to stay on American television and keep the focus on women's basketball, suddenly the lawyers get involved. Suddenly, it's a major problem. Why? Stephen A. Smith knows. And once you hear the real reason, the dark, uncomfortable truth behind this decision, you will realize this has nothing to do with contracts or conflicts. It's purely about control. The league is terrified, but they aren't scared of Caitlin Clark failing. They are haunted by what happens if she succeeds without their permission. What Stephen A. exposed regarding the specific timing of this warning proves this was entirely personal. Let's discuss timing. In sports, business, and politics, timing reveals the true intent. And the timing of this formal warning is not just suspicious, it is absolutely damning. Caitlin Clark's massive NBC deal went public on a Tuesday morning. By Wednesday afternoon, the league office had drafted a warning letter. Less than 36 hours. Let that sink in. This from a league that takes months for basic labor deals, a league that spent years dragging its feet on safe charter flights, a league that still cannot figure out how to market its biggest stars properly. They mobilized a full legal strike team in under 2 days. Stephen A. Smith caught this instantly. He leaned back, shook his head, and said something that sent a chill down my spine. This was not reactive. They were prepared. They were just waiting for her to act. Think about that. The WNBA did not scramble over Caitlin Clark's deal. Their response was locked and loaded. They were watching her. They were anticipating this. The second she stepped outside the lines drawn for her, lines she never accepted, lines that apply to no one else, they pulled the trigger. So, why would they do that? Why would a struggling league waste precious resources policing its top superstar instead of promoting her? Insiders are painting a new picture, and it is far uglier than anyone wants to admit. According to sources, a faction inside the WNBA front office has been uneasy with Caitlin Clark's rise since day one. Not because she did anything wrong, but because she succeeded without their help. See, Caitlin Clark skipped the traditional basketball pipeline. She did not spend years grinding in the shadows, waiting for the league to grant her a spotlight. She built her own stage. At Iowa, she became the most watched player in college basketball history, period. She shattered records that had stood for decades. She packed arenas that never saw sellouts before. She did it on her own terms. By the time she joined the WNBA, she was not asking for permission. She arrived with massive leverage. And there are people in that league office who will never forgive her for it. Stephen A. Smith said it plainly. He called it what it is: pure jealousy disguised as governance. There are people in that building, he noted, who spent 20 years trying to make this league relevant. Then this kid from Iowa arrives and does in 2 seasons what they could not do in 2 decades. Instead of thanking her, they resent her. That formal warning was never about protecting the league's best interests. It was about reminding Caitlin Clark who is in charge. It sent a message: no matter how big you get, we control you. But here is the problem with that plan. This entire move is backfiring in ways the commissioner never saw coming. Caitlin Clark is not just a player. She is a brand. She is a global industry. And the people who put billions of dollars into that industry are watching this situation very closely. What NBC executives said privately when they heard about that warning, well, it changes everything. When news of the WNBA warning hit NBC executive offices, the reaction was not one of confusion. It was not concern. It was disbelief. According to sources inside NBC Universal, senior executives held an emergency call within hours of the story breaking. And the tone of that call? Pure fury. One source said they could not understand how a league they just gave billions to could be this strategically incompetent. Consider the position NBC is in. They just signed a massive media rights deal. They bet big, really big, on the future of the WNBA. A core part of that bet was Caitlin Clark, not just as a player, but as a media star who carries programs, drives ratings, and justifies that massive investment. Bringing Caitlin on as a broadcaster was not just some random side project. It was strategic. It was highly calculated. It was designed to maximize NBC's return by keeping the most marketable athlete in basketball visible all year round. Off-season programs, studio segments, and pregame analysis, Caitlin Clark talking basketball on NBC meant massive ratings. It meant engagement. It meant major advertising dollars. Then the WNBA, the league NBC, just promised billions for broadcasting, turned around and threatened that investment with a legal warning. Stephen A. Smith put it perfectly. You have NBC writing checks to keep this league afloat, yet the commissioner tells their star hire she cannot cash them. What planet are we living on? But here is where it gets even more explosive. NBC did not just complain internally. They made calls. Multiple sources confirm NBC Universal executives reached out to WNBA leadership seeking clarification on that warning. They wanted to know, is this real? Are you actually trying to block this deal? The response they got was silence. No clarification, no walk back, no reassurance, just nothing. That silence spoke louder than any press release ever could. In the business world, silence means one of two things. Either you lack a good answer or you are doubling down. NBC leadership interpreted it as the latter. Now, I need you to understand the gravity of what is happening. The WNBA entire financial future depends on media rights deals. Television money is the lifeblood of every pro sports league. It pays the salaries, it funds expansion, it is what separates a thriving league from a dying one. Right now, the WNBA is actively antagonizing the network that just committed to being their biggest financial partner. Over what? Over Caitlin Clark talking about basketball on television. Stephen A. Smith asked the question now circulating through every executive office in sports media. If this is how the WNBA treats its partners, why would anyone do business with them? That question is not rhetorical. It is already being discussed in boardrooms at ESPN, Amazon, and Apple, as well as every other major sports broadcaster, because the next round of media rights negotiations is coming soon. If the WNBA cannot demonstrate basic competence, if they cannot stop shooting themselves in the foot, those negotiations are going to look very different. The fallout from this decision does not stop at the executive level. Another group is watching this situation unfold. A group that has been waiting for a moment like this. A group about to make the WNBA nightmare even worse. The players and what is happening inside WNBA locker rooms right now, it is the beginning of a revolt. For years, WNBA players kept their frustrations private. They smiled through interviews and posted supportive team content. They towed the company line even when that line felt more like a noose. But this was the breaking point. Within hours of that Caitlin Clark warning becoming public, group chats across the league lit up like wildfire. The messages were not cautious. They were not diplomatic. They were furious. One veteran player, whose name I cannot reveal for obvious reasons, texted her fellow athletes a message that has now been shared with multiple media outlets. They warned Cece for doing what we have been begging to do for years. Make money, stay visible, grow the sport, and they punished her for it. This league does not want us to win. Read that again. They do not want us to win. That is not coming from a bitter bench warmer. That is from a respected veteran who has given a decade to the WNBA. And she is not alone. Stephen A. Smith referenced this growing unrest during his segment. He did not name names. He is too smart for that. But he made it clear his sources inside locker rooms are sending a consistent message. The players are done being silent, and the timing could not be worse for Commissioner Engelbert. Remember what the arrival of Caitlin Clark actually did for this league. Before she showed up, WNBA players were flying commercial. Not private, not charter. They were crammed into middle seats on Southwest flights, hauling luggage, arriving exhausted for nationally televised games. It was embarrassing. dehumanizing even, and the league did nothing about it for over 2 decades. Then Caitlin Clark entered the draft. Suddenly, the ratings exploded. Ticket sales skyrocketed, sponsorships multiplied, and almost overnight, the league suddenly found money for charter flights, the very flights they claimed were impossible for 25 years. The players know this. They know exactly who made those charter flights possible. Now they are watching the league punish that same person for trying to expand her platform. One current player posted a cryptic message on social media just hours after the news broke. No names mentioned, no direct references, just a few words: "Protect the ones who protect us." The basketball world understood immediately who she meant. Throughout the day, subtle messages of support from WNBA athletes flooded social media. Some were obvious, some were coded, but all of them pointed in the same direction. The players are standing with Caitlin Clark against their own league. That is a crisis Commissioner Engelberg never saw coming. Here's the thing about professional athletes. They talk. They talk to agents. They talk to their sponsors. They talk to the media. When the collective sentiment inside locker rooms turns against leadership, that sentiment does not stay contained. It leaks, it spreads. It becomes the headline. Right now, this story is about much more than a formal warning. This is about a league that has lost the trust of its very own players. It is about a commissioner who somehow united her entire workforce against her. Stephen A. Smith saw this coming long ago. During his rant, he issued a direct warning to the WNBA leadership. A warning that looks prophetic now. "You are about to have a player revolt on your hands," he said. "When that happens, no media rights deal in the world will save you." But this player backlash is only half the equation. There is another group watching this whole thing unfold. A group with even more raw power than the athletes. They could make this situation disappear tomorrow or make it 100 times worse. I am talking about sponsors and what they are thinking right now. It would break the league overnight. Let me explain something about pro sports that most fans never think about. The games, the highlights, the jerseys you buy, none of it really matters without one thing: major sponsor money. Sponsors are the invisible engine powering everything. They pay for the broadcasts, they fund the actual arenas, they subsidize the salaries. Without sponsors, professional sports leagues do not just struggle, they cease to exist. Right now, WNBA sponsors are watching this Caitlin Clark drama with growing alarm. Not concern, alarm. When companies invest millions into a sports league, they are not just buying a simple logo placement. They are buying association. They are buying the right to say, "We support this. We believe in this. It represents our brand values." And what does the WNBA represent right now? A league that punishes its biggest star for being successful. They are threatening their most marketable asset for growing her platform. A league that seems more interested in control than progress. That is not an association sponsors want. That is a liability. Stephen A. Smith understood this immediately. During his segment, he asked a question that should terrify everyone in the league front office. If you are Nike or Gatorade or State Farm, are you comfortable watching this? Do you trust this leadership with your massive investment? According to sources close to major WNBA sponsors, the answer is no. They are not comfortable. They are not confident. Some are considering drastic action. Here is what I can say without naming names. At least 2 major WNBA sponsors have started internal talks about their ongoing partnership with the league. These are not casual chats. These are formal reviews. They are pulling out contracts and looking at exit clauses. For these companies, the math is simple. Caitlin Clark is not just a basketball player. She is a marketing phenomenon. She moves products. She drives engagement. She reaches demographics that advertisers have struggled to connect with for decades. Young women, families, Midwest markets, and casual fans. Caitlin Clark reaches all of them. These sponsors are not investing because they love basketball. They are investing because Caitlin Clark makes the league valuable. So when the league turns around and punishes her, when they send warnings over television appearances that only increase her visibility, sponsors start asking uncomfortable questions. Questions like, does this league understand its own value? Questions like, are we backing the right horse here? Questions like, what happens if she leaves? That last question is keeping WNBA executives awake because Caitlin Clark has options. She has more options than any female basketball player in history. The NBC deal proves it. Networks want her face on their shows. Sponsors want her attached to their products. International leagues would pay a fortune to have her play overseas. She does not need the league. The league needs her. And sponsors know this. They know if Caitlin Clark ever decides she has finally had enough. If she decides the juice is not worth the squeeze, the value of women's pro basketball changes overnight. One source close to these sponsors put it bluntly. If Caitlin walks, half these deals get renegotiated against the league. Stephen A. Smith connected these dots on the air. He looked into the camera and delivered a stern warning that should echo through every boardroom in the WNBA. You are not just risking her, you are risking everything she brought with her. Once sponsors crunch the numbers, they will see just how pricey this little ego trip is going to be. But here is the curveball nobody saw coming. As sponsors weigh their options and stars revolt, a massive new player just joined the game. Someone with deep pockets and no patience for high-level mistakes. What they are pitching could change professional women's basketball forever. For years, the WNBA lacked real competition. Sure, those overseas leagues have always been around. We have seen small alternatives and heard plenty of rumors, but none of them were ever truly serious. Nothing that could actually challenge the WNBA's crown as the only elite league in the country. That is changing fast. This Caitlin Clark drama has caught the eye of people waiting for this exact moment. These are people with vision and cash who see the WNBA's self-destruction as a massive business opportunity. Stephen A. Smith dropped some major hints about this. He did not name names, he rarely does with secrets this big, but he made one thing certain. Secret meetings are happening right now that would make the league office very, very stressed. They are talking about a massive rival league, not some minor project or a development system, but a legitimate, fully funded, and very professional alternative to the WNBA. Now, I know what you think. We have heard this before. Every few seasons, someone claims they will start a new pro league. It never happens. You are right, it never has. But everything is different this time around. First, the capital is ready. Private equity has poured into women's sports over the last 2 years. Big investors who ignored women's athletics for decades are now racing to get in. They see the massive growth curves. They see a market that has been undervalued for way too long, and they are writing huge checks. Second, the players are fed up. Remember that locker room drama I mentioned? The players are not just mad about Caitlin Clark. They are angry about being underpaid, disrespected, and watching the WNBA fumble every single big opportunity. If a rival offered them better salaries and better conditions, many of those stars would jump ship. Third, and most importantly, there is finally a face for this new movement. Caitlin Clark. Any league that signs her would not just be real, it would be a major threat. It would immediately own the most famous player in women's pro basketball. It would instantly have the attention of big sponsors and millions of loyal fans. It would become the heart of the basketball world while the WNBA becomes a total afterthought. Stephen A. Smith painted this picture clearly. You think Caitlin Clark actually needs your league? He looked right at the lens as if speaking to the commissioner. She does not. She has massive options. If you keep pushing her, she is going to explore those other options. When she leaves, you will watch everything you built walk right out the door with her. Let me be clear. There is no proof yet that Caitlin is leaving. There is no official launch for a rival league, but talks are definitely happening. The pieces are moving. The WNBA's mistakes are speeding up a process that should have taken years to develop. One source close to major sports investors described the situation like this. 6 months ago, a rival league was just a theory, something fun to talk about over some drinks. Now, it is on the board. It is being modeled and taken very seriously. Here is the scary part for the WNBA. They cannot stop it. They cannot block these private meetings. They cannot stop agents from taking calls or control what happens behind closed doors. All they can do is hope they have not already lost. But based on what Stephen A. Smith shared next, and what is reportedly happening in the commissioner's office right now, it might already be over. There is a reason this warning came out so fast. There is a reason the league moved with such speed. When you see the real motive behind this move, everything changes. Every decision has a deeper purpose. Sometimes it is logic. Sometimes it is strategy or emotion. But there is always a core reason. The WNBA's choice to issue that warning to Caitlin Clark has absolutely nothing to do with actual conflicts of interest. It is not about league integrity, and it has nothing to do with TV deals or legal contracts. It comes down to one thing: power. Stephen A. Smith didn't just drop hints during his latest segment. "You said it outright, this is about control," he declared. His voice dropped with a seriousness I have rarely heard. This is about a commissioner watching her entire league get hijacked by a single player. Instead of embracing it, she grew to resent it. Picture this: imagine you spent your whole career climbing the sports administration ladder. You worked boardrooms. You navigated cutthroat politics. You endured endless meetings on marketing and revenue projections. Then, one day, you finally reach the very top. You are the commissioner, the ultimate authority and face of the league. Except, nobody is looking at your face. They are looking at her. Every interview goes to Caitlin Clark. Every single magazine cover features her face. Every viral moment, every trend, and every single water cooler conversation. It is all Caitlin Clark. You are technically in charge, but she has the power. How does that feel? For some, it is success. It would feel like true validation. It proves that the league you oversee is finally thriving. But for others, it feels like a threat. Multiple sources with knowledge of internal WNBA dynamics have painted a troubling picture of Commissioner Engelbert's mindset over these past 18 months. They describe a leader who has grown deeply uncomfortable with the massive influence of Caitlin Clark. Not because Clark did anything wrong, but because her popularity highlights a very painful truth. This WNBA success isn't about leadership. It is about one superstar player. That reality has reportedly created deep insecurity in the commissioner's office. Stephen A. Smith addressed this head-on. You have a commissioner who should be celebrating the greatest thing that ever happened to her league. He said she is threatened by it instead. She is intimidated, and now she is trying to put it back in a box. That formal warning wasn't about NBC. It was about sending a message saying, no matter how big you get, I am still above you. A message that says you work for this league, not the other way around. A message that says know your place. But here is what Commissioner Engelbert simply doesn't understand. Here is what her advisors failed to explain. You cannot put Caitlin Clark in a box. She is too big, too valuable, and way too important. The moment you try to contain her, you don't diminish her power. You only reveal your own weakness. That is exactly what we are seeing right now. That warning didn't establish the commissioner's authority. It exposed her insecurity. It showed the world that the WNBA's leadership feels threatened by its very own star player. That is a devastating look. Strong leaders don't punch down. They don't attack the very people who make them successful. Strong leaders celebrate excellence. They amplify talent. They build environments where greatness can flourish. Commissioner Engelbert did the exact opposite. Now she's facing consequences she never saw coming. There is one person who hasn't weighed in yet, one person whose response could change everything. One person who has been remarkably silent while the entire sports world explodes around her. Caitlin Clark herself. What she is reportedly planning to do next could end this entire controversy or burn the WNBA to the ground. In the 48 hours since this story broke, Caitlin Clark has said 0 words, no press conferences, no social media, and no interviews. Nothing. And that silence, it is deafening. Look, most athletes in this spot would immediately go on the defensive. They would release a crafted statement through a publicist. They would go on a friendly podcast to share their side. They would fight back in the court of public opinion. Caitlin Clark has done none of that. She is just quiet. In the world of pro sports, that silence is terrifying. It means she is thinking. It means she is strategizing. Silence means she isn't reacting emotionally. She is planning deliberately. Stephen A. Smith picked up on this immediately. You know what scares me if I am the WNBA right now? He asked during his segment. It isn't the backlash. It's not the sponsors or even the players. It's the fact that Caitlin hasn't said a word. She isn't panicking, she's calculating. And he is absolutely right. Caitlin Clark didn't become the most dominant force in basketball by being impulsive. She didn't shatter records by making emotional decisions. Everything she does is intentional. Every single move is calculated. When she goes silent during the biggest controversy of her career, it means she is working on something big. Sources close to Clark's circle have offered glimpses into what's happening behind closed doors. What they are describing is fascinating. Caitlin is reportedly in constant contact with her inner circle agents, lawyers, and advisors since that warning first dropped. But she is not asking them how to apologize. She is not looking for ways to smooth things over. She has just one recurring question. What are my options? That should send chills down Commissioner Engelbert's spine. Caitlin Clark asking about her options is not the behavior of someone who is scared. It is the behavior of someone who knows she has leverage. It is the mindset of someone who knows she holds better cards than the people trying to control her. Just think about those possibilities. She could demand a public apology from the entire league office. She could skip league events or promotional activities. She could even make statements that expose the deep internal dysfunction. She could push her contract boundaries in ways the league office never even anticipated. Or the nuclear option, she could explore those competing league offers that are already swirling. She could start taking meetings. She could listen to pitches. She could let everyone know her future in the WNBA is no longer guaranteed. Even a tiny rumor of that would tank the league's value overnight. And Caitlin Clark knows it. That is why she is silent. She does not need to speak. The silence is a weapon. Every day without a statement means more uncertainty for the WNBA. More sponsors are starting to ask questions. More executives are sweating. More hours of Commissioner Engelbert wondering if she just made the biggest mistake of her professional career. Stephen A. Smith nailed this whole dynamic. Caitlin Clark does not have to act. She just has to wait. While she waits, the league tears itself apart. That is power. Pure power. They handed it to her by being reckless. But here is what makes this entire situation totally unprecedented. Caitlin Clark is not just a basketball star with leverage. She is a cultural icon with a massive platform. When she finally breaks that silence and decides to speak up, the entire world will be listening to her. Every word will be analyzed, every single sentence dissected, every implication will be debated for weeks to come. Whether she says the right or wrong thing, her words could fundamentally reshape the future of women's professional basketball. The question is not if Caitlin Clark will respond, the question is how. What I am about to tell you, what sources are suggesting about her potential response, could change everything we think we know. This is the moment it has all been building toward the controversy. The backlash, the sponsor concerns, player revolts, the whispers of competing leagues, and Caitlin's very calculated silence. It all leads here because according to sources close to Caitlin's team, a final decision has been made. She is going to respond, but not how anyone expected. Not with anger or threats or dramatic announcements about her future. She is going to do something much more devastating. She is going to ignore the warning completely and honor her NBC contract. She is going to appear on national TV talking hoops exactly as planned. She is daring the WNBA to act. Stephen A. Smith predicted this exact outcome. "You watch," he said, while pointing directly at the camera. Caitlin Clark will call their bluff. She will show up on NBC, smile, and act like that warning never existed. Now Commissioner Engelberg has to decide, do I escalate this? Do I choose to fine her? Do I suspend her? Or do I quietly back down and admit I made a mistake? It is a masterclass in leverage. By refusing to acknowledge the warning and moving forward, Caitlin Clark forces the league into a truly impossible position. If they escalate, they are the villains. The league that punished its biggest star for talking basketball on television, they become the laughingstock of pro sports. They become the cautionary tale that every future sports commissioner will study as an example of what not to do. But if they back down, they lose all credibility. It proves their formal warning was just empty posturing. They show the sports world that Caitlin Clark has more power than the commissioner. Either way, the WNBA loses. Either way, Caitlin Clark wins. That is the genius of her response. She does not have to fight publicly. She does not have to engage in a war of words. She just has to keep being excellent and showing up. She just has to keep doing what made her valuable in the first place, and the league has to watch. Stephen A. Smith ended his segment with words that will echo through the entire sports world for years to come. He leaned forward, looked directly into the lens, and delivered his final verdict. "Commissioner Engelbert, I will say this as clearly as possible. You made a massive, unforced, and a completely avoidable mistake. You were handed the greatest gift any professional sports league has ever received. A generational superstar who actually wants to grow your brand. You treated her like an enemy, and that is a mistake. Fix this now, not tomorrow, not next week. Pick up the phone, call Caitlin Clark, apologize, withdraw the warning. Do whatever it takes to make this right. If you do not, you will watch your legacy crumble. And the worst part, you will have no one to blame but yourself. This segment is over, but the fallout is just beginning. Will the warning stay or go? Does Caitlin Clark appear on NBC? We wait and see. Do sponsors stay committed or walk away? Do players stay silent or finally find their voice? Somewhere in a private boardroom, investors are already sketching out a world where the WNBA is not the only choice. This is no longer just a sports story. It is a masterclass in institutional arrogance. It is a lesson in how fast power shifts when leadership loses touch with the real world. This is a warning to every league executive who thinks they can control the uncontrollable. You cannot contain greatness. You choose to be lifted by it or crushed beneath it. Commissioner Engelbert made her choice. Now she lives with the fallout. And Caitlin Clark? She is going to keep doing what she has always done. She is going to keep winning on the court, off the court, and in every room where decisions happen, because at the end of the day, this was never really about a formal league warning. It was about who owns the narrative of women's basketball. Now we know. It is not the league or the commissioner. It is her. It was always her. If this story changed your perspective on the future of the game, drop a comment and let me know. Do you think Commissioner Engelbert should resign? Will Caitlin Clark stay in the WNBA long-term? And do you expect a rival league within 5 years? Subscribe and turn on notifications. This story is far from over, and we will be here when it breaks. Trust me, it will. You will want to hear about it here first. Until then, stay locked in. The future of women's basketball is being written right now. You just watched history unfold.